I've got to ask, is Labor deaf or is it mad? See, it lost the last election when it went crazy with global warming. It wouldn't back the Adani coal mine, for instance. It set huge new targets for cuts in emissions, and it wouldn't tell us the massive cost of all that. And the result, well, the voters in Queensland especially dumped Labor and cost it the unlosable election. And yet, rather than learn that lesson, Labor's climate change spokesman, Mark Butler, today doubled down in Parliament, declaring panic. There was now officially a climate emergency.
We are failing our children. We're failing our grandchildren and generations beyond that. This motion is a chance for the Parliament to change course. It's not a substantive motion in policy terms, but it is an attempt to have the Parliament recognise the gravity of this challenge.
An emergency. Is Labor deaf to the lesson of the last election, or has it gone completely mad with this global warming religion? I mean, what emergency? Yesterday, I flew to Sydney for a party at Balmoral Beach, a Spectator Australia party. Great fun. Subscribe to the magazine, by the way. And it was a superb beach. I mean, absolutely beautiful. There was something, you know, about the rocks at Balmoral Beach. Have a look at the one that's circled there. See how it sticks out of the water now? And now look how it stuck out of the water the same way in 1905, 114 years ago. All that global warming since. All those scary claims about rising seas drowning us, and who really notices any difference anyway? I mean, who notices any differences at all? I mean, cyclones were actually getting fewer. Rainfall, despite this terrible drought, is actually up in Australia over the century. And crops around the world, they're up too. But there is Labor scaring the kids, terrifying the vulnerable by hyping an emergency that even the Environment Department today wouldn't admit to when pushed by Green Senator Sarah Hanson-Young.
What is the description, Ms Evans? What kind of emergency are we in?
So again, I'm not using the word emergency, you are. The climate is definitely changing, Senator.
For the worse?
Well, that's a judgment call and it's an opinion. Whether you choose to use terminology to describe that as worse or better depends on where you are on the globe.
And in fact, the climate has always been changing, and for some parts of the world, right now it's changing probably for the good. No emergency at all. For a start, as NASA says, the space agency, the planet has actually been getting greener over the last 2 decades, particularly in China and India. But let's go back to Labor's climate change emergency and its spokesman spreading the panic today, shouting about this emergency with, what's that? Almost no Labor front benches or anyone at all there to hear him. I mean, the thing is, if Labor MPs thought this really was such an emergency, civilisation about to collapse, mass extinction, mass deaths, why did so few MPs even, well, they just didn't turn up, did they? It's the same deal with so many of these preachers. How can we take their preaching seriously when they don't even take their own advice? A couple of days ago, more than 100 famous figures, artists like Sir Bob Geldof, Jude Law, Sienna Miller, they signed a letter demanding that we change our lifestyles, give up on those wicked fossil fuels that are heating the world, save ourselves from this climate emergency. Now, these people, though, actually admitted that they themselves were hypocrites. They said, "Dear journalists who have called us hypocrites, you're right. We live high carbon lives, and the industries that we're part of have huge carbon footprints. But still listen to us, you know, because we really know." Well, let me just tell you how hypocritical these celebrities are. One of those signatories was actor Benedict Cumberbatch. I like him as an actor. He's just back, though, from filming commercials to persuade billions of people in India and China to buy more petrol-driven cars.
It was one of the first cars I ever dreamed of having, MG Midget or an MGB. And I think it's going to be the same for a lot of people now with the MG Hector.
Benedict, please. You can't tell the rest of us to stop using fossil fuels when you're meanwhile out there making ads and making a nice quid selling cars that use those same fossil fuels. Unless, of course, you really don't believe we face a warming catastrophe. Or you're actually smart enough to privately know that the pain of stopping this global warming is simply not worth the gain.